In 1968, Paul McCartney was heartbroken, restless, and trying to be funny. And somewhere between a breakup and a breakdown, he wrote one of his strangest songs yet, a half-serious, half-silly cowboy story called Rocky Raccoon. It shouldn't have made sense, so why did it? And before we start, do you know which Marvel character it inspired? And is it the silliest Beatles song ever recorded? Or one of the saddest? Like so many Beatles stories, this one begins in India. In February 1968, the band travelled to Rishikesh to study transcendental meditation with the Maharishi. They were searching for peace and maybe a little bit of freedom away from fans, touring, and superstardom. But peace didn't come easily. John was distracted by Yoko, George was diving deeper into spirituality, and Ringo actually only lasted 10 days before heading home. He just couldn't stand the food. And Paul, restless as ever, did what he always did when things felt uncertain. He began to write songs. During those weeks, he started Blackbird, Mother Nature's Son, and very early versions of Obla Dee Obla Da. And then one evening, while playing acoustic guitar with Donovan and Mike Love of the Beach Boys, Paul began working on something new. When you're sitting around with a guitar, you get a bit folky, he later said. I was doing a spoof on the kind of talking blues Dylan did. Just imagining this little story, a train ride of the mind. And that's where Rocky Raccoon was born, as a joke. A Western parody written by a Scouser sitting cross-legged in India. But why the name Rocky Raccoon? Well, some say Rocky was a nod to Rocky Erickson, who was the eccentric frontman of the 13th floor elevators. The first name that he had was Rocky Sassoon. That may have come from either war poet Siegfried Sassoon or the celebrity hairdresser Vidal Sassoon. Whichever it was, it doesn't matter. Paul thought it sounded too polished, too clean, and unfortunately too English. So he wanted it swapped for something rougher and something a lot more American. The name Rocky Raccoon is actually partly inspired by Davy Crockett, who wore a raccoon cap. Paul had watched the legendary frontiersman on TV as a child. Davy Crockett was the king of the wild frontier who fought in wars, he served in Congress, and he died at the Alamo in 1836. The final name was perfect. When the band returned from India, everything had changed, and not in a good way. Their manager Brian Epstein had died the year before, and with him went the discipline that kept the Beatles balanced. Apple Corps, which was their new self-run company, was disorganised and very chaotic, and in the studio, things weren't going much better. The White Album sessions were long, tense, and unpredictable. John was experimenting with Revolution 9. George wanted more creative control and was frustrated that his songs weren't getting taken seriously. And Ringo even at one point in the sessions quit the band for a short time. But that didn't stop Paul from walking in with his strange little cowboy song. So a few months before the White Album, on May the 29th, 1968, the Beatles recorded the first demo of Rocky Raccoon at George's home in Esher, Surrey, using an Ampex 4-track tape machine.
Rocky Raccoon checked into his room.
This early version already sounds really close to the final one, except for the spoken word introduction that starts the song as we know it today. The story itself is simple but brilliant. So Rocky's girlfriend Lil McGill, who is known to the public as Nancy, leaves him for a man named Dan. Fueled by whiskey and pride, Rocky tracks them down and checks into a saloon in their town. He storms into Dan's room, gun in hand, but Dan's quicker, and Rocky ends up shot. A drunk doctor patches him up while Rocky insists that it's only a scratch. And then the doctor hands him a Gideon Bible. And that particular detail about the drunk doctor came from real life. So years earlier, Paul had fallen off his moped on the way to his cousin's house. So he'd cut his lip and he needed stitches. And the doctor who arrived was completely wasted and struggled to thread the needle in his lip. Because of that swollen lip, Paul grew a mustache to cover it and later joked that his mustache inspired the others to grow theirs too. All of them with their mustaches is like such an iconic Beatles look. And then that final image, the one of the Gideon Bible, was also based on something Paul had noticed while touring. He said, "Those Bibles were in every hotel in America. We'd never seen them in England. I thought, who's this guy Gideon leaving them everywhere?" And that image stuck. Recording began on August the 15th, 1968 in Abbey Road Studio 2. And for once, the atmosphere was relaxed. Paul sang lead and played acoustic guitar. adopting a mock American accent. George Martin played the piano, which was slightly out of tune to give the track its ragtime feel. John added harmonica and harmonies, and George played the bass. It was a difficult song to record, Paul said, because it all had to be done in one take. It would have been very hard to edit because of the quirkiness of the vocal, so I had to do a couple of takes until I got the right sort of feel. But it was fun to do. Even so, it took 9 takes to get it right. Engineer Ken Scott recalled it as one of the few light moments from those exhausting White Album sessions. Everyone seemed to enjoy themselves again, he said. For a short while, it felt like the old Beatles were back. 4 friends in a room, laughing, improvising, and remembering what it was like to have fun making music. But underneath the humour, Paul's life was shifting. Not long before recording the song, his 5-year relationship with Jane Asher had just ended after she found out about his relationship with photographer Linda Eastman. So their engagement was now over. And then the tensions between the band in 1968 had never been higher. So I don't know, maybe Paul needed to create something a little bit silly, a little bit daft to lift himself up again. He never said Rocky Raccoon was autobiographical, but it's hard not to see some similarities. A man who's hurt, trying to be brave, and then ultimately humbled. Look, you can join the dots on that one in the comments below. Paul brought the song into the studio a few weeks into the White Album. So it was kind of almost like it was an afterthought. So I don't know, I feel like he was just determined to add a little bit of humour back into the band, to get them all to enjoy working together again, to use humour as a distraction. But what do you think? And it's not the first time Paul has done a song like this. Songs like When I'm 64, Maxwell's Silver Hammer, Obla Dee Obla Da, they all hide melancholy behind bright, playful melodies, and Rocky Raccoon fits right alongside them. When the White Album came out in November 1968, most critics ignored Rocky Raccoon. Some called it filler, but fans didn't. They heard the charm in it, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. To me personally, I think it's proof that you can write a song about anything, even a gunfight in a hotel room, and make it sound iconic. Jack White once called it one of those weird, perfect moments where you realise they could do anything. And yes, before I go, it inspired one of cinema's most loved characters, Rocky Raccoon. The Marvel writer Bill Mantlo explained that he was once listening to the White Album when Rocky Raccoon came on. He liked the sound of the name and he spun it into a science fiction comic book hero. Many comic book fans may have missed the reference, but Spider-Man didn't. When he meets Rocket for the first time in Symbiote Spider-Man, he quips, "Rocket Raccoon," like the Beatles song. And Rocket replies, "What's a Beatles?" Decades later, Paul still smiles whenever it comes up. In his brilliant book Lyrics, he said he'd love to play it live, just because it's been requested so many times by fans. It's a Western written by a kid from Liverpool who'd never been anywhere near the Wild West, he said. "I just imagine this character and where he might end up. I always like the humour in it." It's funny, but it's also about heartbreak, pride, and most of all, learning to laugh when things fall apart. It's a silly song. And that's what Paul McCartney did in 1968. He turned loss, like the loss of his manager, the loss of his girlfriend, the loss of the band that he'd once known, into laughter. And most importantly, into creativity. Thanks very much for watching, all you rock and rollers. I hope you really appreciated this one. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. You know, what's your favourite song on the White Album? Leave it down in the comments below. As usual, I'll see you all down the road.